Hello, friends. Welcome to the Friday conversation. I forget the number, but it's 10, I don't know, some 10 something. But we're here today, 104. But we're here today to talk. Jared knows. We're here today to talk about fairy tales. Are they sweet and cuddly, or are they really out to get us? Is it propaganda? Is it conspiracy? Is it just lighthearted fun? We'll discuss. So, Jared, this is the topic you brought up. So, start us off with an introduction.
Yeah, I'm Jared. I run the Fantasy Thinker YouTube channel, and I occasionally do a blog here on pagechewing.com.
And Susanna.
Hello, my name is Susanna Imaginario. I am a writer and sometimes YouTuber at the end of the weird.
Yes, and I'll have all those links down below in the description. your animals are, your dogs are upset. Pay attention to me. So
yeah, his name is Demon. And,
fairy tales, I think
he loves fairy tales.
Yeah, sounds like it. It's a fitting name. But fairy tales are, I think most of us think as fairy tales is kind of, I don't know, like a comfort. But I don't know. I think the little bit of that I've looked into it, they, like on psychology, read a couple of psychology articles about it, and they're an essential. They permit both the expression of natural violence and at the same time preserve the essential past part of life, without which the child cannot prosper, which is hope. So, thinking back, I guess fairy tales can be pretty violent. Even early Disney movies are pretty dark.
Yeah, they go back. Of course, the origins go back thousands of years, and so you can imagine how they have changed immeasurably over that time. And so it's we were talking about fairy tales on a previous conversation, and we brought them up as how some of them are dark and some of them are grim, and but they've been around so long that, and they originally started as traditionally oral stories that were passed down from one generation to the next, and a lot of these fairy tales had they involved creatures that had like some kind of magical abilities, and they're a genre basically of folklore, and they have magical and fantastical elements, and have supernatural beings, and a lot of the times moral lessons, and so what those moral lessons encompass could have been pretty dark at some times in the past.
Do you both think that? Oh, go ahead, Susanna. Sorry.
I was just asking how are they different, or how are they different from myths, from just mythology?
Yeah, that's a good question, actually. It's hard to pinpoint from what I could, the little bit of research I did, which was just enough to get me in trouble here. But it seems like because they have their roots in the ancient civilizations, just like myths do, including the Sumerians and the Egyptians and Greeks and Romans and the Chinese, and and then they were made more popular during the time of Aesop in the Greek 6th century BC, and of course there was tons of translations from his stuff, but there was still a lot of oral stuff from that. And so what makes it different from myths is interesting, because you got several possible cultural influences on the concepts of fairy tales, and that includes the belief in supernatural beings, similar to ancient Greek and Roman and Egyptian mythologies, where they're associated with nature, magic, and the spirit world. And I would postulate, even though it's you can't really tell by the origins, that some of these fairy tale myths grew into the myths of the gods and stuff like that. Um, because there's a lot of animism and stuff that these things originate from.
So I wonder, is it so for excuse me, for children, for them to be invested in a story, they have the imagination to they 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 have the imagination to carry to kind of take an interest in these fantastical stories, and as adults, when we have a little bit, maybe a little bit more cynical or a little bit more skeptical, do we need something like mythology, something to believe in, some kind of belief system, some with some kind of weight and consequence to be have an interest in stories like that? Can we just not be entertained in a story like that? Do we need something to invest in? Is that
Suzanne, what do you think?
But we are predisposed to like stories. They are far more entertaining than just lessons. Um, I don't know. I don't have kids, but I guess if you try to explain something to a kid by just laying out the facts and the laws, and this is what this is, they're going to start rolling their eyes or blazing or looking at the window very soon. But if you start talking about dragons and dark princes and evil gods and monsters, they pay attention.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, we are natural storytelling creatures. It's part of our evolution in order to explain what we didn't know about the world. You develop stories in order to help explain that and to try to make sense of everything. And and part of that of course, is entertainment, as in order to make the most sense of the world, you're going to want the most entertaining way of doing that in order to engage, who you're talking to and stuff like that. Um, so I think, that definitely makes sense.
hmm. Yeah, I think it's interesting that the same stories are translated. They seem to be universally loved over with different cultures and different belief systems. The same
Mhm.
stories are are translated and still beloved by different types of people. And I guess it's like you mentioned, it's kind of it's the storytelling, it's the stories that I guess the life lessons you can take away from them, regardless of what your culture or belief system is. The universal stories about life, or like it's like mentioned in that article, hope.
Why are they called fairy tales? And
That's a good question.
the reason
That
I'm
was
asking this is growing up in Portugal, fairy tales, contos de fadas, is, well, our idea of what a fairy is very different than what the fairy is here in Ireland, for example. But we still call it fairy tales. And so I was wondering why. How does that happen?
Yeah, I was curious too, because a lot of what's called fairy tales, you have stuff like Little Red Riding Hood and Sleeping Beauty and Pinocchio and all this stuff that's been Disneyfied today. Um, they don't actually, a lot of them don't actually have actual fairies,
Mm-hmm.
that you would, the little creatures with wings or fluttering or something like that. There's a few that do, but it's kind of interesting that the term fairy tale took on a much um, bigger role, I guess, than just being literally about little magical fairies. It's
Yeah, from my Google powers, I found an article. So it looks like in the late 17th century, a French writer called the French fairy tale stories Contes de Fées, I probably mispronounced that, because of the fairies featured in them. This name stuck and was translated to English as fairy tales. So it just kind of one of those things where someone named it something and it just stuck.
Right.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. Yeah, and there was a lot of course, different as different cultures interacted and exchanged stories. The mythologies and folklores and stuff, obviously would have influenced each other, and you would have a blending of different stories that would develop and have similar beings like fairies and in Ireland it'd be like leprechauns.
Mm. Yeah, I guess it's so. Why have fairy tales? Why do we still? Why do they still exist after all this time? Is it? I guess why are they still popular? Why is it still a thing? And I think it's amazing to me the way that the older fairy tales were passed down just orally, not even written down, just generation to generation.
Yeah,
Because we
that's a
just
good
like
question.
stories. We just like telling stories. A good story will endure. The characters might change, the the setting might change, but it's the message within the story that it's important.
And I also think there was some sort of imperative to have morals in these stories to teach as a teaching tool, um, not only originally to explain the world around us, but also um, there's lessons in there too. Uh, in some of the lessons are as simple as don't go out by yourself in the woods or something like that. And others may be um, more societal,
Hmm.
cultural. As far as don't try to don't leave your lane, basically. And so as far as like social class and what have you, back in the Middle Ages and what have you.
Hmm.
Um, and so there was that imperative as well to have that kind of lesson or moral of the story.
Hmm. So so could they be a form of a form of control?
Yeah, that's a good question. Um,
Certainly a form of
I'm not
education.
sure because when you depends on who's doing the educating. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, they do change. Like,
even
I don't have it here because there's no image, or they'll be pointless. But I have these little books of fairy tales that were from my grandmother's time, and those things are brutal.
Hmm.
They are the, the writing is atrocious. I had this idea of making a podcast in 60 stories, and I don't think they're copyrighted or anything. And just they're like these tiny, tiny books. It's called the Lesson from Ivinia, like the Little Ant collection. And it's tiny, tiny booklets with just like 20 pages and illustrations, and it takes 5 minutes to tell. But I can't translate because it's so archaic. But anyway, it's maybe an idea, but they are brutal. And they are a combination of both um, famous Grimm tales, but also with Greek mythology in the mix. And it's such a mix. But um, there's no plot to them. There's just good character, bad character, horrible thing happens. These are for children, by the way.
yeah.
One of them, just the two little shepherds found, I don't know, a golden flute, and one of his brothers got jealous and then killed them and stole the flute, and just bizarre stuffs like this. And I think they did a re-edition of it then later in the 80s or 90s, where there were, the same stories, but a lot less explicit. There was a lot less killings and torture, and because there are torture as well. It's so I guess they do change. Same message, same story, just a little bit toned down. And I wonder why
So I
that
guess it
is
could
as
be
well.
like cautionary tales, maybe just
Yeah.
Yeah.
way to
Yeah.
to scare kids into not doing the wrong thing, like kill their siblings.
Like, yeah, don't kill
Don't
your
kill
sibling.
siblings.
Bad things happen.
I guess could it be that fairy tales still exist? That they're still, they've even specific fairy tales have lasted the test of time because all those times change and cultures change and ideas change. Are humans essentially the same? Are we? I mean, when you break it all down, are we just kind of the same as we've been? Do the same stories appeal to us, especially as kids? We're more of a blank slate. Are we essentially the same as we've been for however many years?
Yeah, I would say so. I don't think the human race has changed that much in the past couple thousand years. We're starting to maybe tip that scale with all this integrated technology, but that's still new. You know, really new in the big scheme of things. And
And
yeah,
learn.
we're the same species.
Yeah, I think
Um,
so. I think story wise, we are pretty much the same as we were since the Bronze Age. Since, there were records of these stories. Of course, they might have thought that it was worthy recording them before, and we just don't have those records. But it was around that
hmm,
time that the first records of these, so-called fairy tales or cautionary tales or myths kind of became a regular thing, and we still like them today. Yeah, I think every child is predisposed to enjoy certain narratives. Everything else then it's learned.
Hmm.
yeah,
I think you can even make the point. You can even make the case that this integrated, excuse me, this integrated technology will make us dumber. It'll actually be worse off for humans and not better. More of a Wall-E type of situation and not something that will. Because if we have all this integration and we depend on it, then we do less. And as the generations go, the more it'll do for us, and the less it
Hmm.
will do, and the dumber we'll get.
yeah.
So,
Well,
Yeah.
yeah. Wall-E is in itself a cautionary tale.
mm,
You know, not to not even go down that road. Uh, so yeah, you could look at it like that. Hopefully, well, it probably wouldn't happen in our lifetimes, but
hopefully not.
hopefully our children and stuff can turn that around and make better use of the technology than TikTok. But
Yeah. Well,
Mhm.
we'll see.
yeah.
Mhm.
Is
I
even
never watched
you
all.
could even no, me either. You can even wonder is because fairy tales were created and were told through generations as a form of entertainment, and that required some sort of storytelling ability and a way to craft a story and to teach in a lesson, like a life lesson or a cautionary tale or entertaining or
Yeah,
funny or whatever it may be. I wonder with technology, whether it's integrated or anything else with technology, are we losing our creativity? Is the level of creativity dropping because we everything comes so easy to us and we have so much to be entertained by that we don't use our imagination as much as we used to, that just in general. I mean, I wonder if
yeah. I don't
Uh,
know. It's hard to guess that because it's easy. It's easy for me to fall into old man mode and say, kids these days they're dumb, But 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 I wouldn't want to do that just as a blanket statement. I, I'm hoping the creativity will manifest in other ways. That's what I hope.
Uh, I think the problem is that it takes less effort um,
Hmm.
for the person learning the story and the person telling the story. Because before it used to be, you know, um, well, before, like way before even television, you just sit around and tell a story and you create that environment, and it was a special occasion as well. So all your attention was focused on the narrative, on the narrator. Then later with cinema, we had the aid of you could actually see stuff happening, but you are when you are at the movie theater, all your attention is on the screen. You are involved, and now there's so much, and you're just scrolling on the phone. You're not paying attention. There's a lot, and there's not enough depth. It's just part of that magic is kind of lost
Hmm.
over the years, and it's been quite fast. I mean, I can't imagine growing up now. Uh, if I like, while growing up, I was starved for any sort of entertainment. Going to the cinema was such a luxury. Having a book was another luxury. I wonder if
Mm.
now if I would care so much about those things if they were so readily available. If I would even
Hmm.
care about a story or narrative or mythology at all. Yeah.
Yeah, everything's so available that
Hmm.
it's and all
Hmm.
available, all encompassing available. That
Everywhere.
it can be quite difficult to pick and choose and uh, have something be when everything is meaningful, nothing is meaningful.
Hmm.
It's that kind of a situation. It's that's what it feels like nowadays sometimes. Yeah.
I'm surprised I couldn't get you guys to get into the yell at cloud moment.
Yell at cloud.
Well,
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's happened yet. But I think over the course of a few generations, if we stay on the same path and everything becomes so easy and so available, we won't have to create stories anymore because we can add some prompts to an AI, some AI, and it'll pump out a
Yeah.
story for us in 10 seconds.
yeah, but you would
Yeah.
still have to create a story that we would like based on the stories that came before. I don't know if
Yeah.
even a AI could create something completely new from scratch that we then would enjoy or even understand.
Yeah. Or yeah, even if it gets to the point where an AI can do certain things that would be good enough for rapid mass consumption. I think there would even at that point there would still be some sort of a turnaround, some sort of a a movement, a counterculture, a movement against that type of entertainment. And I think it would at some point
Like with
it's not
the
going to just
vinyl.
be mindless robot stuff.
I hope so.
Yeah. I hold out hope. I think. I guess. I don't want to be.
Well,
I don't want
it
the
is
world to
also, I
turn
mean,
into grimdark.
no, kind of like it is with vinyl. CDs were
Yeah.
great, and now with all the digital stuff, we would think that they would not be around anymore, but people still love them. So because it's
But
that
they
tactile
are,
thing,
and
collectible thing, and
Mhm.
just the act of putting
yeah,
the disc on the player, and I don't know, maybe in another generation or two, but I see a lot of younger people that still like enjoy doing that. So who knows?
yeah. No, my
There's hope.
my kids got some records, and they're fascinated with them. Absolutely fascinated with a turntable and vinyl.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
It's
never
kind of
gets old.
funny. Yeah.
There are
But
there are
oh, go
I
ahead.
was just say there are a few, speaking of music and physical media, there are a few few YouTubers that I follow that talk, music and physical media and that sort of thing. And I've seen a couple of them recommend recently that if you are a collector, not so much vinyl, because vinyl seems to be having a resurgence, at least a little bit. They are recommending you go out and buy physical media, like buy your favorites before it's gone, because they're still selling, but nowhere near the way they used to. And it's every year it's dipping a little bit. So it is a little depressing to think that we'll depend on streaming services for everything, or things like Spotify, and we'll never really own anything because they can turn that switch off whenever they want to, and you lose it. So for anyone out there who is a collector, it might be, if you do want, like, your favorite albums or your favorite DVDs or whatever, it might be a time to just have it, just in case.
Yeah, and you never know. It could be something that's quite in demand at some point if they do take it away from the cloud or something like that. It's yeah. But back to fairy tales.
Back to fairy tales.
We always get sidetracked.
Oh, I know, that's great. But the I was just like looking at. I found some fairy tales that really went dark. Like even the original Little Red Riding Hood. Originally, she was just simply eaten by the wolf.
Nice.
As a comeuppance for her naivety, and I guess originally it was like a moralized warning for a young woman not to listen to strangers. And so, that's pretty dark, and of course, that has many different variations of Little Red Riding Hood over the years. And similarly, it was Snow White's mother who wanted to eat her lungs and liver, and she meets her comeuppance in the original story by dancing in agony in red-hot iron shoes until she falls down dead.
Wow.
So, and
Snow White.
I got a whole bunch of other ones too. They're really dark.
And it wasn't the Little Mermaid that the prince would make her dance on the new legs, and it was agony for her and stuff.
Yes. In the Little Mermaid, she goes to the sea witch for the legs, so she can find the prince she saves from drowning, and then the sea witch tells her she'll die if she fails to get the kiss from her true love. Tragically, the prince meets somebody else and marries her, and in a cruel twist, the witch gives the Little Mermaid one last chance. If she kills the prince, she'll be allowed to get her tail back and return to her life under the sea. And in the end, she can't bring herself to murder her, so she jumps back into the sea to certain death and ends up as sea foam.
Wow.
Wow.
And,
that's
one version.
I thought.
Wow. Yeah, and that's supposed to be an idea to show how noble self-sacrifice could be.
Huh.
All right.
And a tale to warn young readers about the dangers of having unrealistic dreams and even trying to break out of the social class you were born into. That's Anderson's original take on that. So, listen up, kids.
Yeah. I was just reading the Pinocchio rundown. So, let's see. Jimmy the Talking Cricket, a key character in the movie, is killed off in one of the opening chapters.
Yep.
And Pinocchio doesn't have any remorse for killing him. There's a bit where...
He's tired of Jiminy's moralizing and advice, so he kills him.
And then there's a bit where Pinocchio steals some gold coins, gets caught, and is hanged for his crimes. The author originally intended the story to end with the puppet hanging from a tree dying, seeing his work as a powerful morality tale for young readers. But his editors had other ideas.
Yeah, and the funny thing is, the Disney movie, the original one, is kind of creepy.
Mm.
A little bit.
Yeah, but
When
the
I was
whole
a
thing
kid
is
watching it,
creepy
I
when you
was like,
think
oh,
about it.
yeah, but not that dark, you know. But still, yeah, some of the stuff is really dark.
The the ugly duckling. Um, the duckling is not only laughed at, but is subjected to some pretty horrendous abuse. Though this serves to make the happy ending even more satisfying. In the original tale, it's not just his fellow ducklings who laugh at the small bird. The whole of the barnyard joins in the abuse too. At times, the taunts mocking his supposed ugliness even turn into violence. Then, in a twist that's left out of modern versions, the animals tormentors are almost all slaughtered. The ugly duckling manages to find refuge with a kindly old lady, but her cat is also a bully and forces him out of her home. You just can't catch a break.
Just-
Jeez.
and what is the moral of that story?
Yeah.
Don't be ugly. So, I need to get my hands on those original stuff. Um,
Oh,
Yeah, don't
jeez.
be ugly. If you are, then you deserve it, I guess. I don't know. Uh, yeah, I don't see the. When he sees a group of swans, he expects to be shunned and mocked. Instead, he is welcomed. When he looks in the water at his reflection, the reason is clear. He has become a beautiful swan himself. Oh,
Yeah. And so all his tormentors were killed and eaten.
slaughtered, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
So
so-
everything works out. That's
Yeah.
great.
So, all's well as ends well,
so why? Because it was a swan instead of a duck, and everyone was mocking him because they were jealous of him or something. Oh, I really need to go and find that story.
Yeah, I think he was a swan the whole time, and he was abused because people were jealous of him, and he thought he was a duck.
Mm-hmm.
But when he was able to look at his
Mhm.
reflection, he realized, oh, I'm a swan, so it's okay. So I'm not really that ugly after all. I'm okay. So he wanted to be
Because
he wanted
everyone
to be a
else
pop
that was
star
ugly.
somewhere. Yeah,
Yeah.
he had a long acting career after that.
Oh man.
Oh, and then there's the Fox and the Hound, and there's some.
Yeah, that one's where the farmer and his dogs find the fox family, kill his mate, kill his children, and then in the original version, the fox dies of stress and exhaustion all alone in the woods, while the farmer's favorite dog gets old and needs to be shot and put out of its misery. It's like, what?
It kind of makes you wonder. I mean, I guess life. I mean, we are quite spoiled. Okay, I was because fairy tales, like we were saying, that they adapt with time and society, so they are being gradually toned down and less killings and torture.
Yeah.
But if that was the standard, kind of imagine if you had to prepare a child for for that sort of what sort of world would you live in? But I guess it was a lot harsher. I mean, you could die a lot easier. And if you lived in a small community, just if you stood out just a little bit, you would get shown, you would get mocked. And I guess,
Yeah.
yeah, it's probably proportional.
Yeah, you could say. I mean, a lot of these darker versions of the fairy tales probably got darker because maybe people needed to tell their kids, don't go out in those woods because
Really,
this really dark stuff is going to happen. You don't go to because you go in the woods, you're going to find the witch's gingerbread house, and she's going to boil you up and eat you. And that's so that's so yeah, during tough times, the tales probably got tougher,
Yeah.
and as a bigger warning, especially when you look at the tales of Rapunzel and Sleeping Beauty, and
Hmm.
there were warnings to young women: don't go falling in love with the wrong guy. Nothing but bad things will happen, and that was part of the warning.
Hmm. I think we've talked about this before, Suzanne. Another, I forget what conversation it was, but we talked about then you mentioned how spoiled we are and how kids now, the fairy tales we tell now are more watered down and aren't as
Hmm.
harsh as they once were.
Hmm. Yeah, I think. Even just reading my grandma's little stories. Yeah, absolutely.
Mhm.
You would
We'll
not
get
put
into
a
whether
kid to
that's a good
sleep
or
those days with those stories.
yeah. Well, we'll get into
I'll
whether
try and
that's
have
good
a
or bad,
couple
but
translated.
yeah. Well, say glad you can join us.
Hello.
Yeah, hi. Sorry, I just finished the other conversation and I was debating whether to go to bed or see what you guys were up to. And when I saw the illustrious guest list, I thought I gotta put my head in.
I'm glad you did.
That's an
Good to
entrance.
see you,
Yeah.
Jose.
We were just discussing fairy tales and the harsh fairy tales of yesteryear and how they've been watered down and not quite as harsh or violent as they were before, and whether that's a good or a bad thing. Because I think kids now aren't kind of feel like it's not good to subject kids or younger audiences to violence or to really anything that would make them sad.
I sorry for being late, but I'll tell you, in my school, we somehow have ended up working with a very illustrious child psychologist in Spain. The kind of guy that is always on the news, on the newspapers, on the radio, TV. And he is actually a strong proponent of not sugarcoating things to kids, and that dealing with rejection, seeing the ugly side of life, is a necessary part of growing up, turning into a well rounded adult. So, whether you agree or disagree, that seems to be the prevalent wisdom of the people that prepared to know better. So, maybe we should feed kids the Grimm fairy tales as they were written.
I agree.
I think Steve is muted.
Stevie
So,
muted. Yeah.
You're muted.
Sorry, I was coughing. I just wonder where that came from, where that changed from telling kids story like Pinocchio or the stories we were just talking about, and having these really harsh stories that I think taught kids early on that if you mess around, you're going to find out. And now it's not so much the case of when did that change? When did that become? We don't want to we don't want to trouble anybody. Like let's just make everything really easy and
well,
happy.
somewhere in the last 30 years, and
Mm.
when I grew up, we, you know, I used to live in a sort of block of flats compound. There was there was like an empty plot of land, and then there was another compound next to it. And the pastime was for the gangs of kids to just meet in this sort of uh, open plot of land and just throw rocks at each other and have fights with each other. That's what we did as kids. You grew up in the streets and you walked around the city and you got mugged and you got up to no good and so on. And then I wouldn't even dream of letting my kids cross the road. I think somewhere along the way the attitudes have changed majorly, and I don't know what prompted that. I don't know why that is the case, but that is certainly the case.
Yeah. Jose, that's a good point. Because I remember growing up, and when I got home from school, I left the house. I was gone, like until it got dark when supper was ready. I
And there
was
were no mobile phones
gone.
for your parents to
There
know
were
where you
there
were.
were no mobile phones. There were no, you know, I wouldn't even have heard a megaphone. So, uh, and and our parents just trusted us to come back, when we were hungry. So,
Yeah.
uh, and then so, but nowadays, you're right. Having your kid not visible, not in the area, is a scary thing for a lot of parents. And I wonder if that changed with a with the a greater awareness of what's wrong in the world, with news outlets constantly feeding bad news all the time. Um, with first the advent of cable television made everybody more aware of things, and then of course cell phones and notifications and everything else. And I wonder if the greater awareness prompted the greater fear of your kids not being able to have more independence going out. And
It, it must be that at some point there's some psychological thing around it. It's a well established fact that for some reason sometimes a particular kind of story catches on,
yeah,
and then similar stories that would have gone unreported start to get reported because they catch on and they become, I think so, maybe at some point, I don't know, obviously for us Europeans it's different, but in the US school shootings seem to happen every other weekend. um, I don't know if in Europe, child kidnapping seems to happen every other
Hmm.
weekend, and all of a sudden we have these, or parent, well, I suppose I'm a parent as well. We have this accentuated sense of danger that may be more perceived than justified, and we are overprotective of our children.
yeah.
Do you think, and I wonder this all the time, and I don't have an answer, just food for thought, but I wonder, is the world safer today than it was when we were kids running around doing whatever it is, throwing rocks at each other? Is it safer today than it was then? It's just that we didn't know we didn't have access to all the things that were happening. So we know now hyper aware of everything that happens now. Everything is within a minute or two. We know exactly what's happening.
Yeah,
So,
hyper aware.
so is it really, is it safer now that we just know more, or is it more dangerous now than it was then?
I think it's more sanitized. We live in a more
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's
sanitized. But I think, sorry, Jared.
No, you're right.
No, because I think, like particularly in Spain, over the last 5, 8 years, there's been cases of gender violence. Been a couple of cases of uh, group sort of rape of women, and now you would have thought that every woman is at risk of being gang raped if they go out at night. Um, and it's just, I have a colleague that cried when she got told she was going to have a baby girl, because to bring up a girl in this world is like, and I think it's like, whoa, like these things happen, and I'm sure they've always happened, and that doesn't make them any less disgusting. But I don't think that. I think we're even more aware these days of how we should conduct ourselves and what's right and what's wrong. And certain behaviors are not as tolerated or as accepted as they were 20 years ago. So I think, in a sense, maybe the world is safer, but we just perceive it to not be.
Yeah, I think you're
I
right.
don't know,
It
like
it's if you if you look at the statistics, the actual statistics, crime statistics, and actual data, everything is down as far as all the bad stuff happening in the world. But everything is also super reported and super. We're hypersensitive to all of it, and that's the difference.
yeah, I mean, growing up. it was like you, Jared. Like when I was a kid, up until puberty, then let's put the caveat there, I would stay outside. I would still live in town. I would stay outside playing with the kids in the streets, no problem. But I guess there was less traffic, but we were aware of the traffic, and my parents, they would always don't take sweets from strangers, don't get into vans, don't go with strangers. Don't. We had all those rules that we followed because we knew what happened to kids who didn't. There was always we were aware of stories of kids that would disappear, of girls that would be raped, and so we were aware, and you take the risk. I was approached more than once, didn't take any sweets. One time I thought I was being followed and got in a panic. I just knocked the first door, pretending that it was my own, that I just arrived, and then, oh, sorry, I'm mistaken, and ran back. We were, I guess, a bit more um, prepared for those situations as well. Then I grew up. The moment I hit puberty, the walls closed around me. My parents decided, no, 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 you can't go out at all because boys eventually. And but it was never safe for women again after when in my 20s, and many times I saw girls putting themselves in situations and it was just unnecessary. And now the only difference I see is that people don't think we can take care of ourselves. And so sometimes I guess the only way to actually to go out and have fun and just be independent is to take a risk. And it's not, and but but society, even what is defined as risk, I think there's a lot of um, girls crying wolf, and just that doesn't help anything. And I know that I am digressing, but just is a perception of what is dangerous, the perception of how do you deal with that danger. It's everything is an overreaction. Things just escalate so fast that I understand that sometimes for a parent the best solution would be, well, just don't go out, just don't this, just don't wear that, don't, or just
Yeah.
protect women because they can't take care of themselves, protect the children because they definitely can't take care of themselves, and that's not productive. I don't think that's the best way to deal with things because there would always gonna be bad people out there, and we just need to be prepared for them. It's not by hiding away and looking at our screens all day at home that, yeah, are we safe? Can we just live like that? We might just be plugged in the whole time.
Yeah.
I
That was
think
a long rant. I'm
also
sorry.
no, 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 no. But I think also think because everything has become, I don't know, more professional. Kids have
Yeah,
lost the
entities get
ability
involved.
to
Yeah.
to socialize. Like
Hmm.
when I was a kid, if I wanted to play soccer for my fellow Americans in the chat, you would just go out to the town square, meet other kids, and use your T-shirts as goalposts and play
Yeah.
soccer.
Hmm.
Now, nobody plays soccer in the streets. You go to a soccer club and you're part of a team, and you're going to spend money, and it's all a lot more. The whole sports thing has become much more professional from a very young age, and everything is structured. So my children move from they live in a permanent state of structure. They're either at school, or they are at the athletics club, or they are with their
Yeah.
parents. Then I mean, obviously, they are 5 and 8 years old, so they haven't experienced yet being unsupervised with their friends and
Yeah.
handling themselves that way. Maybe
No,
it's
you're
too
right.
young for them, but at some point, not that far in the future, in the next 6, 7 years, my oldest one, presumably will want to start going out at night, and we all need to make that transition. Him, his mum, myself, and him. We cannot go from being in rigid structures all the time to here, go out and come back at 2, 3 in the morning. It's just,
And that's
Yeah,
when
right.
problems will
Yeah,
happen.
when we were kids.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because we would, when we were kids, when I was 12 or whatever, my brother and I had a paper route. So we would leave and we would find other kids on the route and have have an impromptu game of football, American football for our European listeners. And, and, we would have that impromptu game that would we would pick teams and play, and you don't see that anymore. You don't see that kind of like you said, Jose, everything's structured and everything has to be planned and everybody has schedules and there's not time for there's a certain beauty, I think, for kids in boredom in order to have in order to create spontaneity in a creation of doing something. And I don't think there's enough of that type of boredom
my
today.
kids don't know how to do that.
Especially because cell phones stop that from happening.
Yeah.
Social media stops you from being bored. And so you lose that beauty of boredom, that creativity of boredom.
I agree 100%.
And what do you do when you are bored? If you are outside and you are bored, what do? You observe people. You learn.
Yes.
And that's something. No, when you don't have a phone. Like, again, as a kid, how many hours I spent with my best friends. We had this little corner in town, and we just sit there after school and talk and just watch people. How much I learned just by observing. And not just for writing or anything, just by observing people, hours of that. And talking, and it was brilliant. I don't see a kid or teenager do that at all today.
Nope.
I'm assuming we've all been kids here without a dime in our pockets, but spending the whole evening out with your friends, just walking around town,
walking around, window shopping, just
being
sitting in the garden.
Just being in the presence of your friends, talking shit.
Exactly.
And now you see them. You see the kids. They're all sitting with the phones in their hands under a tree, all doing whatever it is that they're playing. So yeah, there's a certain innocence lost, or there's a certain.
I don't think it's innocent. It's the opposite. I think people are a lot more naive, not innocent, naive now, because. By doing that, by just observing, being outside, by learning how to be on your own, learning how to defend yourself, how to navigate around other people, you are building character. You are developing the skills to, if the situation, if a dangerous situation occurred, you can deal with it. We didn't have cell phones. We couldn't call the police. We didn't have, even if when someone, got hurt, you'd have to go and knock on doors or find the next payphone, or just, you have to be proactive. You couldn't just sit around and click a button.
Yeah. I got bit by a dog when I was like 13 or whatever, and I had to manage to get home somehow before I could tell somebody and go get it treated. But that was a terrifying ride home on a bike to have a bleeding leg from a dog bite, and you learned how to deal with it. You just had to. You had to do it. Nowadays, it's encountering a dog in the first place would be rare, and then and then you had the cell phone right there, right? You'd be probably filming getting bit by a dog.
Yeah.
But
So sorry, these fairy tales. So why do we still keep reading them to our kids? I still read my kids the Three Little Pigs and the Three Billy Goats Gruff and the Gingerbread Man and
What version?
all this.
The grimdark version or the modern version?
Oh, Steve.
No, we were
Steve.
reading the original stories of like Pinocchio, The Little Mermaid, The Ugly Duckling, and they're pretty dark.
they're very dark, yeah.
Pretty bleak. But
Yeah.
I think they taught important life lessons to scare the shit out of kids, that they wouldn't kill their siblings after they heard certain stories. So, it was a learning experience. It was learning process.
Yes, Snow White wasn't particularly a cheerful story, was it?
Oh no, that's not.
But I suppose they still have some. They've demonstrated some staying power. They still sell in some way or another. I think every kid still has had them read to them. Is it because at the core they are trying to do something meaningful?
Yeah, we were speculating earlier about they're used as morality tales. They're used as warnings a lot. A lot of them are warnings, uh, for societal warnings or danger warnings of some sort. And we also were saying how they've constantly been changing over the thousands of years that they've been around.
But to Steve's point, even if today we have the sanitized version instead of the grim dark version, the OGs of grim dark, has the purpose been perverted, or the morality hasn't changed of the story, has it?
And the delivery has changed. I think the tone
and the
of the
morality
story
as well. I think.
So you actually think that the core of the Little Mermaid has changed?
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Drastically.
But go on and enlighten me.
Well, Jared, do you want to fill in on the original?
Oh, sorry, and if you discussed this already,
No, it's worth hearing twice.
No, because there's someone listening to the podcast at home or something. Let's not pick another one you haven't talked about then.
Well,
all right,
go ahead, George.
We got Rapunzel.
Okay.
In the darker version here, Rapunzel, the prince climbs up her hair into the tower. Rapunzel gets pregnant. The witch learns of her romance in a fit of rage, cuts off her hair, which the witch then uses to entice the prince up the tower. And as soon as he reaches the window, the witch leans out, pushes the poor prince. He falls into a rose bush and with thorns impaling his eyes.
Wow.
That's the darker version, yeah. So that's another one we haven't gone over that one yet.
So hang on. So that's grim dark OG Rapunzel, and was the palatable 21st version ending of the story?
What's that?
What was the palatable 21st version ending of the story?
Let's see. What was the latest version?
Something about the prince climbs the tower, saves the princess, or something like that. I don't know.
Yeah, he saves her.
They marry and are happily ever after.
Ever after.
And I'm sure she kept her hair, something like that.
Not me. That's a bit of a change of the story, isn't it?
Yeah.
But I'm just going to mention the Little Mermaid, because that one, at least, it was a complete 180 from, you should learn your place and not dream too high, etc., etc. And then we have the Disney version of, follow your dreams. Everything's possible, go for it.
Mm-hmm.
That's a 180. You're right.
So, is that helpful? I don't know which one would be more
No.
helpful
I mean,
to teach.
one's a warning and one's encouraging. So it depends on what your goal is, I guess.
Yeah, but not everyone can be a princess. Marry the prince.
Could I?
What?
But then, can we blame America
Oh,
for repurposing and repackaging? No, I'm asking the question. I'm not being facetious. I'm asking the question. Can we blame America for repackaging these traditional dark European tales and repurposing them for the American dream? Whereas instead of the very classist European system, know your place, don't have dreams above your station, to the land of dreams,
Hmm.
come and you can become and be whatever you want to dream or you can dream. Is that maybe?
That's interesting.
yeah, it could be that
Yeah,
it appeals to
could be.
that kind of outlook, and it could also be just commercially that it would reach a wider audience and more people would buy it and then make more money. So,
Which is a very which is a very American thing,
yeah,
isn't it?
I mean, possible too.
Well, horror has a big audience. Those would be excellent horror movies. Why are they not popular?
I'm sure they've been done in some form.
I mean, um, but yeah, that is a good point. Blame
Because we obviously most of it's changing a little bit now, but most of popular culture post Depression, Second World War is American. We have imported a lot of American culture and ideas
Yeah.
into Europe. I think that's changing a little bit, but maybe between 1945 and 1990, we imported a lot of stuff.
No, you're
over
right there, Jose. Because the like pre World War II, America was doing its best to try to be European, and and then post World War II, you're right. A lot of that switched as America became the superpower. Um, in the super industrialization, and so you're right about that, and so that may be part of it, in that um, the American dream was, at least on the surface, was becoming realized in the pursuit of happiness, and
Mhm.
in the growth and expansionism that they experienced back then, was seen to be a positive thing, that you could achieve this dream and make it in America at that point. And certainly that was also the advent in time where Walt Disney got big and started breaking out and presenting these some of these fairy tales in his version, and it probably all ties in together there.
Just because it's fun, let's talk about Hansel and Gretel really quick.
Okay.
So
That's gonna be so fucked up.
Yeah.
The original one. Come on, I don't know, but I'm assuming that the witch eats them or something like that.
oh, it gets worse.
And they don't cut.
It gets worse. So the two children get lost in the woods. They find the witch and they escape the house that the witch is trying to kill them and eat them. And later in the French version that is believed to be what the modern fairy tale is based on, the pair actually end up stumbling across the devil himself. He is far smarter than the witch. He captures the children as they try to escape and then builds a sawhorse to execute them on. In a sick twist, the brother and sister pretend not to know how they can get on the sawhorse, so the devil's wife offers to demonstrate. When she's on there, the youngsters use the saw to slash her throat and escape to their freedom.
Wow.
Awesome. They win.
They're pretty resourceful. I think that's right. That's like,
Yeah. I was gonna say. Teach
See,
kids to
That's
be
how you
resourceful.
teach kids.
Yeah. Yeah, take care of yourself. Do it. Yeah, there you go. Oh,
So, and what's the common socially accepted version now?
Oh, they just escaped the gingerbread house that the witch is trying to eat them, and they live happily ever after.
They happily ever after as well.
Don't
Yeah.
they burn the witch,
They still,
often? That was my version.
yeah. Sometimes they put the witch in the oven
Oh wow!
and
Oh yeah, that's the one I grew up with.
burn
Yeah,
up.
yeah,
Yeah,
Yeah.
burn her up. Yeah.
Somewhere in the middle. No.
Mm.
Kids these days, they can't even have their revenge. Unbelievable.
Yeah. We haven't done the darkest one that I've come across
Oui.
yet.
Oh, hang on. Let me get a drink. I need this. Bear with, please.
Oh, did you
So
see Little Red Riding Hood? Holy crap!
yeah, I'm looking at Sleeping Beauty. It's really disturbing. I'll wait till Jose gets back because he wants to hear this.
Where
But,
are you finding all those things? I need to.
What?
Let me send the link in the chat.
Yeah, there's
Okay.
there was a couple places that I found some of these, but I know some of the ones Steve said were some of the ones I already had too. So you probably found the same website. But,
I found. Yeah, there's loads.
yeah. So you okay? You ready, Jose? This one. This Sleeping Beauty one's pretty bad. Instead of giving Sleeping Beauty a chaste kiss, a king comes by, carries her to her lodge bed, and rapes her. Indeed, it's only after she's given birth to twins and then begin feeding on her bosom does Sleeping Beauty actually awaken from her long slumber. And then it doesn't end there. The king was a married man when he assaulted Sleeping Beauty. His wife, the queen, ends up hearing about this illegitimate twins and wants them not only killed, but also try to devise a way of making her unfaithful husband eat the dead babies. In the end, the evil queen's plan is foiled, and bizarrely, the royal couple separate, and the king ends up marrying Sleeping Beauty. So, despite the fact that that union began with him raping his future wife.
Jeez.
Wow.
Sorry, are you sure that's a legit website and it's not someone fucking up with like traditional fairy tales?
No. It's,
Yeah, no, it's
No, I didn't know about this
That's
one,
what it
but
is.
the other ones, yeah. So, wow.
Bloody hell.
I'm not sure what the moral was there.
jeez.
Let's unpick that. Go on. Let's unpick that.
Well, it's not that different from all the Zeus and Hera, how she would always go about punishing the women he would have affairs with. It's
That's true.
same dynamic.
Maybe if the queen had given the king what the king wanted, he wouldn't have had to go and do the thing
Maybe.
on Snow White.
So the moral is
fairly-
men always get
fairly
what they want,
misogyny-
one way or the other.
I don't know who the audience of this podcast is, so I'm trying to refrain what I want to
Go
say.
for it.
That's fine.
So, yeah, I don't know. Maybe there's certain things you have to be willing to do to keep the marriage and the relationship ticking along nicely, isn't it? Compromise. It's all about compromise, isn't it? I buy you flowers on Valentine's Day. You
Be nice to me.
know.
Right.
Yes. Yes. That's compromise, isn't it?
Let me go for a run.
Yeah.
And, right? In your case, Jose.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. That is indeed my case. Yes.
No, but Suzanne's right. There is a lot of mythology that is actually disturbingly similar to that, as far as gods and mortals go. So that's very interesting.
Did you read the original Red Riding Hood.
Yeah,
Why are you smiling, Jared?
it's just funny. It's just funny.
Go on.
Yeah, that's the warning for pretty young women to not listen to strangers. That the Red Riding Hood.
So, so in most versions of the tale, the wolf eats the grandmother whole. He then dresses her in a bonnet and waits in her bed. Little Red Riding Hood is tricked into believing the wolf is her elderly relative and joins him in bed, where she is also eaten. Most famously, in the widely read version written by Charles Perrault, published in 1697, there is no happy ending. Nobody comes to rescue her and cut her from the wolf's stomach. More disturbingly, in Perrault's version, the girl strips naked before getting into bed, a clear indication that the fairy tale was originally a morality tale warning girls of wily seducers. When the Brothers Grimm penned their version more than a century later, such sexual overtones were removed, and versions where the wolf serves Little Red pieces of her own grandmother to eat, were completely ignored. Instead, they gave the tale a happy ending, with a brave and handsome huntsman saving the day by killing the wolf and cutting both the grandmother and her granddaughter free from his stomach.
All right.
1697 is the original Perrault one. Oh, wow. These things are a lot older than
That
I
was your
thought they
takeaway.
Yeah.
Well,
That's
after the true version of Snow White, I mean,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Jesus. But surely these things, I suppose the morality of the time was different. So were they intended to be read to children?
oh yeah.
Although I suppose that around that time, as soon as a woman was fertile, they got given away in marriage, isn't it? So girls used to be married off very, very young.
Yeah. You know, like like we said earlier, I think that it was definitely warnings. There were definitely warnings. They were saying don't do this. Don't go outside the village. Don't go wandering out in the woods. Don't Uh, so they were pretty grim warnings for children not to do certain things.
Yeah, I think you have to keep kids scared because it was the survival thing. You had to keep them from wandering too far away to be eaten by a wolf or get lost and not be found again, because you couldn't exactly just call someone to come and, I'm going to, at a pin, come and pick me up. It was, if you wander too far, then you're probably dead. And interestingly enough, Little Red Riding Hood, there are some versions that hint towards bestiality, in which Red Riding Hood uses her body to save herself from death, thus consummating her love with the wolf on the very sheets upon which her grandmother was killed. See, there's that's I wonder if some of these were used as some sick, like, that's a little far.
No, but I suppose maybe to bypass church morality that was so imperative at the time, the only way to get some kind of spiciness going on was to hide it like that? Or have we misinterpreted history and these were properly, horrifying, grimdark stories that got mistranslated at some point as fairy tales that were not actually meant to be tales for kids?
It wasn't that long ago. Those versions, at least.
1697? That's pretty fucking long ago.
I mean, I'm sure there were tons of different versions floating around. Like that we were saying that these things have been around for thousands of years, and they've been changed over the years, and they've been retold, and they were originally oral traditional stories.
Mm-hmm.
So that that there's the amounts of the amount of versions that there are probably just off the charts numerous.
Mhm.
I think that website that we've been quoting is specifically like some of the worst versions that there are. I hope
I
that's the
hope.
worst versions, and and so of
So
course
I guess the
there's
point
also much in
we're
between.
mostly
Yeah.
gonna blame Disney for this then, for making pretty versions
For the
of these tales.
the pretty versions, yeah,
Mm.
yeah, sure.
Well, I'm not sure that if they made the original version of Pinocchio, that parents would be lining up with their kids to watch that. So, I guess they had to. I had to make it something fun. So it's interesting because parents had been telling their kids these stories for hundreds of years, but when it's in a movie, why did they change it when it's a movie versus something they tell their kids before bed?
Well, for I mean, in the case of Disney, you had to make a product. You had to make something sellable. Movies weren't allowed to show anything bad back then.
That's
They
a good
had a
point.
strict code
Mhm.
about what could be on the screen, and so you're getting into animation, and you have there's only certain things you can do, and your animation, of course, was a fledgling thing and was considered more marketable towards younger audiences
Mm.
than serious quote movies. But and so that makes perfect sense that they would be lighter in nature than some of your more grim type fairy tales.
Mm. That's a good point. What was considered vulgar or violent? I mean, even in the 50s, like Elvis shaking his hips was like, oh my God, it's,
Yeah,
clutching pearls. It's so, yeah, it's a good point.
Yeah,
So
and
have we
it's
gone
one
full
thing to tell the
circle?
kids that the wolf ate the grandmother or they cut up the belly to take it out, than actually see it. Go to the cinema. Oh well, let's see the wolf eating. Just yeah, the whole different experience. Maybe that's fine.
I was just wondering if it's the time to go full circle and start producing these movies as the stories were originally conceived.
yeah. I think some have tried. I wouldn't. It wouldn't surprise me if you found some horror type stories out there that you know that were not for kids, rated R, so to speak.
Hmm.
I mean, you got the action film. Was it Snow White and the Huntsman or something like that?
Yeah.
That's a stylized action type movie that was a version of Snow White. And I'm sure there's all kinds of other versions out there that
Yeah, there's the horror
we may not
version,
know
which
about.
is brilliant, but it's still not as
Yeah,
bad as the original.
right. But it's something created for some under different audience. Yeah.
I think people would widely reject these types of stories if it had anything to do with like these classics. Even like look at like comic book characters that like in certain movies, Batman kills people and people just lost it because Batman doesn't kill people. It's a fictional character. Like, calm down. So I think if you would all these people who grew up with these stories, if they read about Pinocchio being hanged from a tree, left for dead, I think, or have his feet burned off, I don't know that they would enjoy it too much after knowing a certain version for this song. I don't know that they'd enjoy it too much.
But what if you came up with some sort of advertising line, like, you know, Pinocchio, if you've never seen him before?
Sorry, I hit the button on accident.
No.
Yeah,
Okay,
you did.
well,
I just saw
second,
the
we
numbers
still on.
flashing on the
I was trying to
screen.
mute myself and I hit the wrong button. Sorry, that was my mistake. But we're on again. So go ahead.
Okay.
No, like I said, I was wondering whether if you came up with some like a new set of movies, like the original fairy tales.
Yeah, but you
As it,
can't really do, because the problem is that there's, even the ones that were written down first in 1697 and 1700s are still not original. They're just their versions of passed down oral traditional fairy tales. So what's original? Um, so that's always going to pop up, and everybody's these like there is no original really. There's different versions that different people make. Uh,
no, and I suppose the Walt Disney movies are so ingrained in the
yeah,
common psyche that even the real life remakes are not free of controversy, aren't they? Because they've
correct.
changed certain
Yeah,
things in some of them.
Walt Disney was definitely the most successful versions of some of these fairy
Mm.
tales. Uh, but I don't think there's any real way to determine what's original.
So
That's the beauty
I
of
think
fairy
it,
stories, though.
yeah, I've been here trying to think of any modern fairy tales that are not adaptations, because the world now changed enough, you know, to allow for that. Why? Then I'm
well,
sure
Peter
they
Pan, I think,
exist.
would be the most,
Peter Pan,
possibly the
yeah,
most
it's
recent
not
one.
that modern, but yeah, it's really, yeah.
No, but we're not going to call Harry Potter a fairy tale, are we?
No,
Well,
Is that the Peter Pan or the Very Hungry Caterpillar?
no, that's a good example. When was that first published? The Harry
What, the
Caterpillar.
Very Hungry Caterpillar?
Yeah.
I think it's late 70s.
Okay.
Which at one point I could tell my son without looking at the book.
nice.
Yeah.
I don't know what it depends on. Yeah, what do you consider a fairy tale that would be created recently? Is like what's Winnie the Pooh? Is that a fairy tale?
Alice in Wonderland?
What is, yeah, Alice in Wonderland? Um, that interesting. Interestingly enough, there's a lot
Mm.
of, like, in the 19th century. There's a lot of stories with fairies in them that
Mm.
you know the where people go to fairyland. And they it's like kind of like portal fantasies, I guess. Um, are they considered fairy tales in the classic sense that we know fairy
No,
tales,
I
or
think to be a
are they
fairy
just
tale, you have to be able to tell it. It has to be short, not going to be
right?
set a
Yeah.
novel.
Uh, and so, at what point did a lot of these fairy tales then transform into stories about fairies in a different land or something like? It's interesting. It's the same, I guess, the same question we had about the difference between mythology and fairy tales. But
Mm.
I suppose possibly after the Industrial Revolution, because children's tales are a luxury good, so to speak. You will only buy your kid children's books if there are enough kids that can actually read and you've got enough disposable income. So I'm assuming for the vast majority of people that were struggling to make ends meet on a pre-industrial revolution time, these fairy tales were what Jared was alluding to before, these oral traditions with a deep warning or moralizing side to them. The second people have a bit more money, and the second you have a bit more money for fun, not just to survive, then a new market opens up, which is children's books.
mm,
Mm.
And maybe that's why you get things like Alice in Wonderland and these portal fairy tales that lack that moralizing intent in them.
Yeah, and more geared towards
And as education
entertainment
be,
and educational yeah. Yeah.
and as education became compulsory by law rather than the uh, just the remit of the upper classes who were the only ones that could afford an
Hmm.
education.
Yeah, it's a good point. Yep.
Yeah.
So I guess it could be in a way that they're a form of control. Entertainment, I guess, is entertainment in general a form of control? Form of it's a big distraction.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Bread and
It can be
circus,
used as such.
always.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I mean, I get that. I'm not entirely sure. I think you need to elaborate a lot more on that, Steve.
Well, I think entertainment, I think, is a way to distract us from what's really happening in the world, whether it's uh,
Yeah.
whether it's whatever the case may be. There's always some distraction to distract us from really seeing what's going on, whether it's good or it's bad, or whether it's
Yeah.
someone doesn't think or some entity doesn't think we can handle it, or we're capable of understanding what's really happening, or just kind of a sleight of hand thing, but don't look over here and see what we're doing. Just watch this game, and don't worry about what else is going on in the world. Watch this movie as an escape, and don't worry about what's going on over here. It's not important. Just stay busy with your entertainment stuff.
I would buy that argument more on a pre-television time. On a post-television time, not on a pre-television time, where the flow of news was a lot slower, and therefore getting a sense for what was actually going on in the world
Well, I
was
don't
a little
know.
bit more complicated.
Yeah, I don't know about that, Jose. I
Go on.
think that was the original purpose of the bread and circus in the Roman
Mm-hmm.
Empire, was to
Exactly.
distract the populace from their troubles.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree,
Keep them fed,
100%.
keep them entertained. That's always been. Now we're just a bit more harder to entertain. Or maybe
Yes, but
not,
that's
because back
but
then people died constantly
but
for
that's
entertainment. So I don't know.
but that bread and circus is more necessary on a society where you are a tyrant that is living on the edge of a social revolution. And I
Mm-hmm.
don't know whether then you're going to say that in the current political climate, when you're up for re-election, maybe it's even more necessary
Mm.
to keep the people fed and entertained.
Yeah, Super Bowl is more necessary than ever.
Oh God, I don't know. I don't know. I could talk myself out of my own argument.
You could probably you could go around in circles with that. I could definitely
Yeah.
see that happening.
But then I suppose it's hard. Then yeah, then it's harder these days, isn't it? We are a lot more capable of figuring out what's going on. Not
Are we? I
necessarily.
mean,
Yeah,
you would think we have all
we're
the
yeah.
information is out there, but we, most people don't seem to be very good at it. They either
Well, we
believe
have a ton of
anything they read
information.
or just don't even go look for it.
Yeah, but yeah, is it the right information? There's a whole
Yeah, it's
there's a lot to
this
go in there.
the sieving process is just too time
Yeah,
consuming.
it's not even deceiving, not even getting wrong information, but just finding the information you actually need or want. Is hard.
You have to go and check and check. How many times
Or
just is this
maybe
real? Is this real? And go and check. At least with fairy tales, we knew where we were. We knew
oh,
it. They were just fantasy.
Hmm.
but that's what I was gonna say. So on a post television time, I can see how the bread and circus, the entertainment, forget about what we're doing. Here's some Super Bowl. Here's the next, I don't know, Big Brother show, whatever. I can see how that works because there is a means of mass distribution. But when Lewis Carroll wrote Alice in Wonderland, I'm not entirely sure he had that kind of secret agenda there. These
Yeah.
things were not produced from mega corporations that are propping up whatever factic powers are at
Yeah.
play.
But I think there's a big difference between authorial intent and commercial intent.
Hmm. Yeah.
Every author wants to have commercial success, I
They
assume.
want to, yeah, sure, yeah, financially, yeah, and recognition and what have you. But but then when you get into uh, what that property can be used for in in a bread and circus type of manner, that's different.
Yeah, that's why so many novels are sometimes they only become famous decades after publication when then they become relevant. It wasn't the author intention
Mm.
to be relevant, or maybe it was, but for different reasons. Just sell a few books, and
For different reasons, yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah.
and you
Like you,
can tell
that if you can take
whenever
Tolkien, you know,
someone writes with the intent of being with a commercial intent to write about something about, especially if it's fiction. If it's non-fiction, that's something else, but if in fiction you can tell, and it usually backfires because things change so fast.
yeah. But it's like with Tolkien, he had tons of reasons for writing the Lord of the Rings, right? His own personal reasons, and I don't think that one of his intents was to be a huge counterculture success of the late 50s and 60s. That was the furthest thing from his mind, and so that's the difference.
I also think entertainment can be a way to push certain ideologies and to change the course of kind of change societal norms and to make things that weren't acceptable 10 years ago acceptable today or expected or encouraged. And I'm not talking about anything specific, just saying it's a way. It's I don't think it's always been that in some form, a way to for change, for to change perceptions and right or wrong. I think it's a way of not only a distraction but also a way to change the way people think and the way that what we deem acceptable and not acceptable.
Hmm. But yeah, anything from fashion trends to um, haircuts, ideologies. Yeah, life imitates art. If you want to influence life, that's the way to do it.
Huss says is contemplating deeply.
The thing is that I'm too stupid, because
Oh,
I totally understand what you're saying, and obviously our society is ever changing and evolving, and those changes must come from somewhere. They must originate somewhere, and then they get propagated through time. Sometimes quicker, sometimes slower, and changes. It's like a wave, until it ripples out. I'm just too stupid to put myself in the situation of someone who wants to change the world, and therefore, in order to do that, I'm going to write this book, or I'm going to paint this picture, or I'm going to make this movie, and you know create a seismic change in society that's going to be felt decades from now.
yeah.
Um,
Who can you name that would actually
like
accomplish
obviously,
that?
so obviously no, I think obviously it's happened. So in the arts, obviously Picasso, revolutionized pictorial art. But do I think that he set out to do that? That the way he invented or developed the cubism, was purposely to you know
Yeah.
radically alter the landscape, or
Right.
was
Yeah.
it just his own expression that then echoed with other people
I
in
would.
the same way?
Yeah. I would expect it was his own expression, and then it snowballed into what it became. That's
Right.
my suspicion. Yeah.
So in the same way, like you were alluding to before, I don't think Tolkien set out to become a cultural icon. I
Correct.
think
Yeah.
he has something to say about his experiences in World War One. He did
Yeah.
say, admittedly, that he wanted to provide Britain with a mythology that he felt it lacked.
Yeah. But he admitted that he admitted that he didn't set out to become the icon of epic fantasy in the future, he uh, and he also in that mythology he was trying to create, he was doing it for him and his scholarly pals. That's who he was doing
Mm.
it for. It wasn't he admitted that he did not see the Lord of the Rings blowing up the way that it did in the 60s and stuff like that.
I suppose culturally, I suppose the only aspect of the art where I can see change as being purposeful is in music, where you actually at different points in time you've had new styles of music develop purposely to alter the landscape, whether it be blues and jazz that originated in the South in the United States, or the heavy metal that was born in Britain in the late 60s. They were purposely trying to change the musical landscape, or like punk rock in the 70s. But 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 in literature, I don't know that much.
Yeah, you wonder. But you wonder how many people, you say they tried to change the music industry, but how many people also tried and failed, that we never hear about.
Mm.
And, we're only hear about the successes. Um, so you don't know how much history went into that. How many people tried to be Black Sabbath before Black Sabbath was Black Sabbath. Uh,
It's an interesting point.
yeah.
I suspect not very many, but that's just an intuition.
Kind of going back to fairy tales, I'm just wondering, would you consider like the 1001 Nights as fairy tale?
Um, that was actually mentioned in one of the websites that I was perusing,
Because they
as a
are
form of
for
fairy tale.
adults, I think.
Yeah,
They were not written for children. So
right.
where
Yep.
do they stand? Would they be fairy tales? Are fairy tales just for children or mostly for children? Where are we gonna draw the line there?
Yeah, that's interesting because the origins of fairy tales were basically they're a genre of folklore, um, that feature stories with magical and fantastical elements, and so yeah, they're fairy tales, I guess, in a way. But I mean, I guess the question is, do fairy tales have to be geared towards teaching children a lesson, or
Yes.
can they just be? Um, that's a good question. You know,
So, but you could say the same about fables. Aesop's fables
yeah,
also have a huge moral component.
yep,
No, they don't have fairies. They're not necessarily aimed just at children.
yep. But Aesop fables do have, they do usually have some sort of like a mystical element toward them, on some level, even if it's just
I mean,
subtle. So,
they got. I don't know if it's that subtle. I think they got very clear morality,
yeah,
isn't it?
yeah,
Um, but it's not so much of a warning like in a fairy tale. I think a fairy tale is a warning of what could happen if you behave in a certain way, whereas a fable is more like this is how you should behave rather than how you shouldn't behave.
Hmm.
That's quite a distinction. Yeah.
But would you put them in the same category? Is it kind of the same thing?
Well, according to Google, so Google does it all. Fables are stories that are passed down with a good lesson to be learned, and are about animals, plants, or forces of nature that are human-like. Fairy tales are stories that are specifically for kids, involve magical characters, have good and evil characters, and generally start with "Once upon a time." So
Hmm.
I just had to share this. So I guess that simplifies things. So you start the story with "Once upon a time" and write it for kids, and that's a fairy tale.
Yeah. But then a certain author of slipstream fantasy that I know could start a fable with the sentence "once upon a time" and just fuck it all up for everyone.
I didn't stop. I'm gonna have to. Yeah.
Once upon a
I
time.
would just put them all together. I would just put them all together in the same sort of moralizing, this intent, moral teaching.
Okay, so there one, and I think we agreed on on a few things that they always have to have some um, moral involved. They always have to try to teach something. Be fairly short, so not a novel, and that they have to be geared for kids, and they have changed a lot over the time.
Although, sorry, Steve, go
Oh
on.
no, I was just going to say we at the beginning when we first got on, I think it was mentioned in the article in the psychology article I was reading that the stories have remained the same, but they really haven't. They've changed a lot and continue to change.
Mhm. And there's actually a lot of them. I went into the Project Gutenberg website to download them on my Kindle, and I didn't when I realized how many there are. Because we all know the classics, Hansel and Gretel, um, Little Red Riding Hood, whatever. But the Grimm fairy tales, there's actually like 2 or 3 volumes of them. There's loads and loads of them that actually are nowhere near as popular as the ones we mentioned. Um, and in the end, I decided I didn't want another long book there on the TBR. But there's a lot of them. So there's plenty a lot more grimdark to unpick there, Jared.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. So are we all in agreement too that we should go back to the darker fairy tales for kids and not the lighter anyone can be a princess?
Absolutely.
Steve, how old is your youngest?
15.
Ah, fuck it. No, then no. Because I was going to say, how about you read to your child the original tales and tell me how it goes and whether I should do the same with
Oh, they'll
mine.
stay up. Oh, if you read it to a little, they'll probably lose sleep. But I think that's just because of what they're used to. I mean, it's just we don't subject them to the type of stories that these were originally.
But then we need to find someone with young kids, because then the younger they are, the less exposed they are to this sanitized society. So we should find a willing lab rat to read the original fairy tales to their kid. I think if someone is listening at home and they've got like a 3-year-old, could you please let us know?
Yeah,
how it
who
goes?
wants to traumatize their kids?
You can peel them away from the screen and say, "No, you don't want to watch that Pinocchio here."
And luckily, we cannot be found for lawsuits for moral and psychological damage. Isn't
Yeah,
it?
definitely.
But you gotta admit, it's a brilliant
It was a
idea.
good idea. I feel bad for the kid though. They'll probably grow up and find each of us and get payback because they'll learn it from the stories.
No, but I think if Holly Tinsley was here, she'd probably say something like, "Oh, I wish I had been read those stories," or something like that.
I don't know. Well, she regrets some of that. Let's ask her.
Yeah.
No, it was fun. It was a good topic, Jared. It was an interesting. I had a lot of fun talking about all these crazy fairy tales I didn't know.
Yeah, who knew a simple question would lead to all this?
Yeah, it usually does though.
Yeah, it's always the way.
Yeah, but so cool. So in the meantime, until next time, Jared, where can people find you?
You can find me at the Fantasy Thinker on YouTube, and you can check out my occasional post on pagechewing.com.
And Jose.
Yeah, I can be found at the Jose's Amazing Worlds YouTube channel and also in the Page Chewing forums.
And Susanna.
You can find me on YouTube at Den of the Weird, Paste Chewing Forums, and X as Chronodendron. And you can find my books pretty much everywhere. Timelessness. First book is Weird Gods, and there's a new one coming up, Oublié, next month, available for pre-order. Check it out.
Yes, go get your pre-order while you can. So cool. Yeah, you can find all of us on the Page Chewing forum if you want to volunteer to traumatize your kids. Contact us there, and we'll set it all up. So in the meantime, we'll talk to everyone soon. Have a great weekend.
Bye-bye.
Bye.